I'm not sure when Abe first got obsessed with Halloween, but I knew about it before we even started dating. I actually met him for the first time at a costume party. I was dressed as an apple. And by that, I mean I wore a red dress and a green hat. I threw it together last minute, since my friend was the one dragging me to the party. Abe was dressed as a werewolf, stuck between a wolf and a man. The amount of effort he put into his costume was remarkable. He even walked like a halfling and howled at incoming party guests. Something drew us together. Maybe it was our mutual hatred of candy corn, or the way we would both down 5 beers without blinking. Whatever it was, it led to a first date, and within 7 months, we were engaged. The thing I loved most about Abe was his ambition. He was a business major with plans on starting his own company. He would design and produce Halloween-themed goods for haunted houses. He explained that more and more ordinary people were opening up their homes in the spirit of a good scare, and he wanted to support that by making unique and frightening products. Plus, he dreamed of having his own haunted house someday. It wasn't my cup of tea, but I adored his passion. We were married in May and pregnant by June. Abe decided to use his savings to buy us a nice little house right outside the city. The neighborhood was full of families and right next to an elementary school. Our neighbors were Paula and Jake, a wonderful young couple with 2 small children. We bonded with them right away. All seemed fine, except for one thing. Dirk. Dirk lived to the right of us. He was a white man in his mid-50s who took one look at our biracial family and nearly had a conniption. When he saw us walking or working in the yard, he would give the Nazi salute and a belly laugh, as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever done. It wasn't just us he tortured. No one in the neighborhood liked him. He would leave his poor dog outside in the rain all day, chained roughly to his porch. His wife was a small woman who endured a vast vocabulary of insults day and night. If a kid's ball flew into his yard, he made a point to pick it up and carry it inside. It was almost like he tried to do anything possible to make himself hated. But oddly, there was a one-day exception to his cruelty, and that was Halloween. Our first year in the neighborhood, we got to experience Dirk's haunted house. Abe had been longingly planning one of his own, but it was simply out of our budget this year. So when we found out our loudmouth racist neighbor had one, we were more than a little shocked. We were having coffee with Paula and Jake on a cold October day when we heard about the event. "He does it every year," Jake said, juggling their 2-year-old and nearly spilling a teapot. "It's his thing." "But do you go?" Abe asked, confused. "Of course," Paula laughed. "It's the one time of year when the man's demeanor actually changes and matches the occasion. Plus, it's genuinely scary in there. He must work on the props all year, and he never uses the same thing twice." Paula and I were nervous to go at first, Jake admitted. But literally everyone in the neighborhood shows up. People even let their kids in there, and you know I wouldn't let either of mine near his house. It's just like Halloween is his thing or something. He can be as evil as he wants to, and it just works. Abe and I were still a little scared, and not in a good way, of Dirk's haunted house. But we decided to go and at least judge for ourselves. We got to the door and Dirk's wife was standing outside handing out tickets. She took one look at my pregnant belly and shook her head. "No, not for you," she said in a shaky, off-kilter tone. "Why?" "Too scary. Not want to risk the baby." She handed Abe a ticket and shooed me away with her fingers. "Don't worry, hon, I'll go in and tell you how it is," he said kindly. "I'm sure it's terrible anyway." So I went home. I was more than a little disappointed, but being scared wasn't really my thing anyway. Abe came home around an hour later. He was frowning and looked awful. "Babe, how was Dirk's house?" His demeanor didn't change as he slumped down on the couch. In a sad, almost hurtful voice, he replied, "It was incredible." Surprised, I urged him to tell me more. "He had an entire room where blood poured out from the walls. Animatronic ghosts jumped out at you when you least expected it. There was an empty cradle with a trail of blood. It was a perfect mixture of disturbing and downright scary. The best part was the only time you actually had to interact with Dirk was when he was playing a torture victim. Watching him scream was rather satisfying. But it didn't make up for the fact that this jerk, this guy who is basically the epitome of all things evil, is better at Halloween than I am." "Sweetie," I laughed, "I know you love Halloween, but just because Dirk makes a good haunted house doesn't make him better than you. Next year I'm sure you'll knock it out of the park." He gave me a small smile, and I thought the matter was over. But it wasn't. Abe talked constantly about the perfection of Dirk's haunted house. He would make guesses at how things were put together. He spent his free time building prototypes to mimic Dirk's props, or even improve upon them. This went on for months. A huge animatronic witch had taken over our living room. Robotic spiders prowled the hallway. The only room he didn't touch was the nursery. But soon we had a little one to occupy our time. Ophelia, Fee for short, was born in March. She was absolutely perfect. She was born with a full head of curly black hair. Maybe I had a bias, but I honestly had never seen anything more beautiful than an infant. I loved her from the instant I held her in my arms. Abe was no different. We doted on our baby girl as much as possible. Abe was an excellent father. I loved watching the two of them interact. Abe was so gentle with her. His only flaw was his continued obsession with the haunted house. When he wasn't at work or playing with Fee, he was designing for the perfect Halloween house. When October came, Abe was feverish with excitement. The plan: make a haunted house like nothing anyone had ever seen. Not only would it be scary while you were inside, but the fear would last for nights afterwards. He wanted to really freak people out, cause nightmares, make his exhibit unforgettable. I believed he could do it. With his imagination and engineering background, anything was possible. He started to advertise his haunted house a week or so before Halloween. I think his goal was to get as many people there as possible. He left flyers in people's mailboxes, even under their windshield wipers. He even left one for Dirk. But that was a massive mistake. No sooner had he dropped the flyer off than Dirk was banging on our front door. Abe was still out flyering, but I greeted Dirk as politely as I could. "Hello, Dirk," I said civilly.
"What the heck is this?"
he screamed through my screen door. In his hand was one of Abe's flyers. "Keep your voice down." I turned around to check on Fee, who was gurgling sleepily in her swing. Before I knew what was happening, Dirk burst through the screen door and had his arm around my neck.
"Your husband thinks he can take over. In my neighborhood. My territory."
His arm dug into my throat. "Please, Dirk, you're hurting me." Tears fell down my cheeks. I was all alone. I knew Dirk was a bully, but I didn't know he could be this dangerous.
"I could do much worse to you."
He pushed me onto the floor and stood over me.
"You tell your husband that if he goes through with the haunted house, I'll kill him. No, I'll kill you first. Then your little abomination over there. And I'll make him watch."
He spat at my face.
"No one crosses me."
With that, he slammed the front door and left me on the ground, sobbing. Fee had woken up and was crying as well. Shakily, I got to my feet and called Abe. He told me to call the police, but I was too scared. Dirk was a violent man. I just sat on the floor rocking Fee until Abe came home. He did everything to make me feel safer. He wrapped us up in blankets and made me hot chocolate. With hurt in his voice, he pleaded me to call the police. "I don't want to make it worse," I said softly. "But he's just a bully, a racist jerk." I looked him in the eye. "You have to promise me you won't do a haunted house this year." Abe's mouth fell open. "Come on, that means he wins." "I don't care what it means. I don't want that man anywhere near us." Abe shook his head. "This haunted house means the world to me." I glared at him. "More than me? More than Fee?" He didn't say anything. Instead, he kissed my forehead and stroked Fee's cheek. I could see in his face that he regretted what he said. It was so hurtful. But I knew it came from a place of pain, not cruelty. I put Fee in her crib and went to bed. Abe kissed me deeply. He stroked my hair and whispered that everything would be okay. I felt confident that it was all over. I wish I had been right. But in those blissful hours of sleep, I had forgotten the violent monster that was our neighbor. By the time we woke up, Abe made a self-care plan for me. He would buy me a few nights at a hotel over Halloween. That way, I would feel safer and free from Dirk. He said he would stay home and take care of Fee. Although I was nervous to leave, Abe convinced me that it would be the best for everyone. He would keep an eye on the house and make sure nothing sinister went on with Dirk. I begged Abe to come with me. He explained that having the baby around might cause extra anxiety for me. Plus, I deserved a few days to relax. Reluctantly, I left my family for Halloween weekend. I have to admit, it was a wonderful hotel. It had a full spa, swimming pool, salon, and even a 5-star restaurant. My first day I took advantage of everything. The massages and bubble baths did quite a bit to help ease my fear. I wrapped myself in a fluffy robe and ordered room service. It was pure luxury. I called Abe a little after 5. He said everything was fine. Dirk hadn't bothered him at all. He even let me talk to little Fee, who was babbling into the phone. I giggled. I was so blessed. Abe told me to just take care of myself and come home tomorrow once Halloween was over. On Halloween morning, I awoke in a cushy bed, covered in delicate blankets, feeling incredible. My night had been full of dreams of Dirk moving away. I stayed in my bed leisurely until I got hungry. I wandered down to the restaurant and treated myself to the largest waffle I'd ever seen. Then I spent the afternoon getting my nails done. I felt great. Around 4, I called Abe to check in, but he didn't answer. I figured maybe he was running an errand. I went back to my room and called again at 4:30. Still, no answer. My chest got tight. It wasn't like Abe not to answer the phone. I called again at 4:45. Still no answer. I started to panic. I called Paula and Jake. Paula answered. "Hey, what's up?" She sounded surprised to hear me. "I was wondering if you might be willing to go over and check on Abe and Fee. He isn't answering the phone and I'm getting worried." She laughed. "I just saw him. He's fine." I breathed a long sigh of relief. "Thank God, Paula. I was just so scared." "The only thing to be scared of is your house," Paula chuckled. "Sounds like it's opening up soon." I paused. "What are you talking about?" "Your house," Paula said, confused. "Abe's been working on it all weekend. It looks amazingly creepy. Your guy is definitely going to beat Dirk this year." I began to hyperventilate. This couldn't be true. "Paula, listen to me closely. Are you saying Abe is putting a haunted house up?" "Yes." Paula probably thought I was insane. Is everything okay?" I tried to respond, but the phone fell from my hand. I could hear Paula talking on the other end, but I couldn't handle it. Abe had broken my trust. He had gone behind my back. He had endangered us. Who knew what Dirk could do to him? Chaffee. Without a word, I gathered my things, hanging up on a concerned Paula. I left the hotel without checking out. I had to get home as soon as possible. The streets were full of people in costumes. There was a ton of traffic. I anxiously waited for the lights to turn green. A man on the street started screaming, and I nearly rear-ended the car in front of me. I was completely on edge. Too many people who looked dead. Too many monsters. I tried to go as fast as I could, but it took me over an hour to get home. When I arrived, I barely recognized the house. Abe had transformed the entire outside of it into a ramshackle hovel. He used broken boards to construct a facade covering the front. Out of one window hung a very realistic-looking body, which twitched when the wind hit it. There was a large sign by the door painted in red.
"Come in, but don't expect to come out."
I watched as some of our neighbors entered the house, giggling in fear. Abe was nowhere to be seen. Terrified, I parked the car and went inside. The first thing I heard was a baby crying. It didn't sound like Fee, but the noise unnerved me. I could hear screams from other people in the house. Abe had removed all our things and replaced every single room with disturbing imagery. The front hall was padded in something that looked like breathing flesh. The living room was the scene of a suicide. A man lay on the floor, surrounded by paper. The paper was littered in the scribbles of a madman. On the walls were more ramblings, but these included the names of people in the neighborhood. I checked to see if the man on the floor was Abe, but thank God he wasn't. I had no idea who it was, but it definitely wasn't a mannequin. The dining room was covered in creepy dolls. Some of them moved unexpectedly. One even reached out, and I swear it grabbed my hair. I don't know how Abe made them, but they were so disturbing. One of the dolls kept taking off her dress and putting it back on. She had deep red between her legs. I ran into the next room, which was the kitchen. It was a butcher shop. Slabs of meat were tossed across the floor. Everything was rotting. Flies and rats feasted on the remains. The fridge was shaking as though someone were inside. I screamed, "Abe! Abe, come out right now!" But no one responded. A group of young girls rushed by me, shrieking with frightful delight. I bit my lip and climbed the stairs toward the bedroom. I was done. Abe had gone too far. He had ruined our house. I finally got upstairs and heard someone throwing up in the bedroom. I walked in and saw the bedroom was basically untouched. I stepped cautiously, knowing that any minute something scary might pop up. The large witch Abe had created was sitting on the bed, but she wasn't plugged in. That's when I noticed Jake throwing up on the floor. I approached him slowly. "Jake, are you?" When he saw me, he jumped up and grabbed my shoulders. His eyes were crazy. "Get out!" he yelled. Get outside now!" I shook him off. "So you're part of this crap storm too?" I realized he was crying. "No, just please go outside. Paula called the police. I don't know what happened. We can't find Abe." A dead cold spread through my body. "What happened?" I demanded. "Please, go outside and wait for the police." That's when I heard the group of girls start to scream. They were in the room across from the bedroom, the nursery. Any control I had left was gone. I ran from Jake into the next room. Fee's crib was in the middle of the floor. The scene was pure white except for the mobile that hung above her head. Instead of planes that usually hung there, there was a noose. Attached to the noose was the dead body of a baby slowly twirling. I clutched my chest. It couldn't be. It had to be fake. The corpse spun just a little further, and I saw the face. Her face. My beautiful Ophelia, hanging like a bloated maggot from the rope. Her skin was parchment white. There was no blood on her, just vomit and deep marks where she was bound. I fell backward. Something deeply human inside of me howled. Jake was suddenly beside me, trying to help, but I threw him back. Dirk had gotten his revenge. Tears welled up, but I refused to let them fall. I stormed out of the house. I knew Dirk had Abe as well. I would stop whatever sick, twisted thing he was doing to my husband. Jake kept calling for me to stop, but I only had eyes to the house next door. I had no fear. I ran past his tiny wife who looked terrified at me. I didn't flinch at the jump scares or gross decor inside his house. I would find him. Dirk, I whistled menacingly. I'm coming for you. I don't know what the inside looked like. I didn't care. I had one mission, to find the monster who did that to my daughter. It only took me a few minutes to find Dirk on the lawn, prowling in an insect costume. When he saw me, his eyes fired with rage. You, he hissed. I told you not to let your husband, I finished for him, grabbing the shovel next to his house. Not to let my black husband make a haunted house. You're such a pathetic sack of crap that you care more about this one thing than about my child's life. His rage subsided into confusion. No, you don't get to talk. I don't know where I got the strength, but I lifted the shovel and clocked him in the jaw. He fell to the ground with a satisfying bang. You are a monster, you know that? I kicked him in the stomach. After I find out what you did to my husband, I'll kill you. He moaned in pain. I have no idea what you're talking about. No? I slammed him again and again in the stomach. You truly are an insect. I hovered the heel of my shoe over his left eye and pressed down. His eyeball popped like a grape. He was now screaming. Pain is too good for you. I'll make you wish you had never spoken a word to my family. Jake ran onto the scene. He was flanked by Paula and 2 police officers who had their guns drawn. Paula took Jake's hand in fear. Jake started talking in a soft tone. Honey, you need to come with us. I turned to them, finally letting the tears out of my eyes. You saw what he did to my baby. Jake was crying too. No, you don't understand. I understand that he strangled Fee until her little heart stopped beating. My hands were in fists. Jake turned to Paula, who took over. Honey, Dirk didn't kill her. My body was shaking so much I nearly fainted. He did. He killed her, and he probably killed Abe too. I just can't find him yet. He threatened me last week. He told me he would do this. I don't know anything about last week, but we know he didn't hurt Ophelia. Paula moved towards me, lifting a gentle hand. Abe turned himself in 20 minutes ago. What? The world suddenly stood still. I couldn't hear anyone crying or screaming. It was just quiet. The words hung in the air, inaudible. I could almost see them, touch them. Abe. When I came back to reality, I had been handcuffed by one of the officers. Paula was trying to speak to me as they led me away. I couldn't understand. Nothing made sense. Paula began to yell, "Please, don't take her to the station. Let her stay with us. She's grieving. She doesn't know." But they took me to the station anyway. I was arrested for disorderly conduct. After taking my statement, they decided to let me back to Paula and Jake's. They held me as I cried. They held my hands as I screamed. And finally, after hours and hours, they tucked me into bed to let me sleep. If it weren't for them, I might have ended my life that night. I'm still staying with them now as their full-time nanny. We've kind of created a new little family for ourselves. And we don't celebrate Halloween. In some rare speck of humanity, Dirk didn't press charges against me. I think he almost respected me for what I had done. He wears an eye patch now and never speaks to me. But when he sees me, he lifts his chin in admiration. The violence I enacted made me more like him. I don't like to think about it. I saw Abe twice after that, once at his trial where he was sentenced to 35 years in prison for the murder of our daughter. When the judge asked him about that night, he spent hours in joyful description of building the house and setting up the scenes. He exclaimed that he had officially won. His was the best haunted house anyone had ever seen, and Ophelia had been the linchpin to secure his victory. A month before the trial, I requested a meeting with him. His lawyers strongly objected to it, but he made the final choice. I went to the prison where he was being held. He sat behind a thick wall of glass. He looked terrible. I wasn't sad about it. I lifted the receiver and pressed it to my ear. He did the same. We sat in silence for many minutes. Then, finally, in as strong a voice as I could muster, I asked, "Why?" He looked away from me. "Isn't it obvious?" When his eyes slid back into place, there was something crazy in them. His forlorn look morphed into a sinister smile. I held my breath. All he said was, "I loved Halloween more than I loved you."